Okay, I am about 100 yards from my hives. They're the other side of that little group of bushes and trees you see straight ahead. And I'm creating a feeding station. We're in the dearth and they're really struggling to find food. So I've done a couple of different things. I'm experimenting here. This is actually something my sister-in-law was throwing away. I honestly don't know what the thing originally was, but I'm going to experiment with it as a dry feeder. What I am doing, I just put a little on the top just to really attract them, but inside I have dry feed. And what I find is that when I let the top tray slide down, there's really just enough room for a bee. And so that should allow the bees to get in without much rain getting in. So if we do have some rain, it should keep what's up inside there fairly dry, especially if I'll keep it up near the middle towards the post. I'll see if it works. No harm, no foul. If it doesn't, what I've got here, at some point I may put in a bigger one because this is only a gallon. But I've just taken what is a water feeder for chickens and I'm using it as a sugar water feeder. And so the goal of all of this is to give them somewhere, and the reason I've got those sticks sticking out on the sides, there's another one on the back, it's just to give the bees another place to land and get some water. So what I'm trying to do is create a place where they can get something to eat that is not right in front of the hives. If I feed them sugar water in and around the hives, I run a greater risk of fighting and them trying to rob each other's hives. So I'm going to try to do it away from the hives. I have found among beekeepers there's a lot of disagreement one way or another. If I choose to post this, then my suspicion is the comments will be divided both ways. There are a number of experienced beekeepers who say that this is what you ought to do, feed them away from the hives. There are others who say, no, if you feed them away from the hives, then you invite bees from other colonies and they'll end up sharing disease. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. I've got a lot of experienced beekeepers saying just the opposite of each other, and both of them have personal experience that they would say supports their position. So the only thing I know to do in light of that is try it, see how it works, and learn from doing. So that's what we're going to try. This is just the second bee I've seen at the feeding station. It's been up, I don't know, 18 or 19 hours. It was over 17 hours after I set it up before I saw the first bee at it. So it took them a while to find it, and I checked it fairly regularly. Okay, the honeybees are not really using the sugar water, but they are wearing out the dry pollen that I put out. And this is one of those, I guess they call lazy Susans, kind of turnstile things that people put in cabinets kind of in the corner, and that my sister-in-law was going to throw away, that I made into a little feeder. I just put a little on the top to get them started coming. The bulk of the pollen is actually inside. It'll be interesting to see if they will start going inside or not. There's actually one inside. Let's see if I can get a shot. So you can see there's at least one inside. My plan was to put the bulk of the pollen up inside so that it wouldn't get rained on, because when I let the top tray come down, there's literally just enough room for a bee. You can see ants are getting into the sugar water. So So what I've done is I've put the 4 legs of my stand in buckets of water, and that should shut down the ants getting into the sugar water. Okay, they have discovered it now. You can see they have they've drunk about half of that. You can see the sugar water line there. Okay, I'm going to put some pollen patties in my hives, and so I've just been using my hive tool to cut them in half, and that's just typically what I do. That seems to work okay for my hives. Half one of these will go quite a ways in my hives. A lot of mine are smaller colonies because I've had splits this year and swarms, and so most of them are only a couple of boxes. So I find this size works pretty well for me. Okay, what I'm going to do is add one of these top screens. I'm trying to get one on all of my hives. It helps with cooling the hive, but it also makes it a lot easier to add pollen patties. I find that I can just lay pollen patties on that screen, and these holes are big enough that the bees can come up through it and get it. It just makes it a lot easier to put pollen patties in the hive. I don't have to worry about it being too tight of a fit. I don't have to pop that inner cover. And so I'm just trying to get one on each of my hives. So for example, the hive right next door already has one. And let's see, this hive, the hive either side of it has one. That's what I'm talking about. It's screened, and so it cools the hive and helps me to do internal feeding. Okay, I was able to get another of my cooling and feeding screens on, and these were done by Albert Zook over in Etheridge, Tennessee. I'm going to work on making my own, but his have worked well. I need to make a couple of more so that all my hives have one, at least while it's hot. I'll come back later and put in some pollen patties. But let me just give you just some information that I have found to be true on my hives. When I put the cooling and feeding box on this big tall hive, it's 4 medium boxes, and I've split off that hive a few times. That hive can be grumpy when you go in it, and it was not happy when I took that top box off. Whereas this split hive, this hive is actually a split off of that 4-box tall one over there. And it has 2 boxes, 2 medium boxes, and they are just much calmer. I have found the bigger boxes are just grumpier. They've got more bees in them, and you just have to be a little more careful with them. I found that if I'm dealing with a 1-box hive, or like this is a deep box. This is a deep box. You can see the smaller one next to it is a medium. So you have 2 mediums here, and this has a deep box and then has one of those cooling and feeding boxes. This one over here, for example, is a 3-box hive. That's a 2-box hive. This one has a deep box, a medium box, and what is called a shallow box. So it actually has 3 different size boxes. This box is just where I have an internal sugar feeder. But the point I'm trying to make is that in my hives, you not only have differences in temperament between the hives, in other words, each hive has its own attitude, but I have found generally the smaller hives are much calmer and much easier to work with without having to wear a bee hood and that kind of stuff than the bigger hives. Now, there may be other beekeepers that have had different experiences, but that has generally been true. And I thought an example of that today was found when I was putting on these cooling and feeding boxes. When I put it on the 4-box hive, I had several of them go after me. When I put it on the 2-box hive, they didn't even know I was there, even though you'll see there were bees all over the inner lid. When I took it off, they just didn't pay any attention to me. Okay, here is a small split hive that was robbed out. Now, hive moths have moved in. They were not originally in there. That's all happened since it was robbed out. So what I'll do is take these frames and put them in the freezer so that I can use them again later. Putting them in the freezer kills any moth or other pest larvae that's down in those cells. Now, I mentioned that after this hive robbed out and died, that some hive moths had gotten in there. Another thing you can do is just put the frames out in the sun. Hive moths do not do well in sunlight. So you could, take these frames and set them out in the sun. That'll take care of the problem as well. Okay, I put these out in the sun because hive moths, anything that they've put in those frames in the cells won't survive in the sun. I mentioned earlier that the larvae, those are pronounced a couple of different ways, of hive moths and hive beetles do not like the sun. I pulled this frame out of a dead hive where you can see several had moved in. I put it out in the sun and you can see they are desperately trying to get out of the way. So the point I'm trying to make is one of the things you can do to get them out of a frame is to put it out in the sun. So what I'll do is knock them off and kill them, and then I will actually put this frame in the freezer. So we have put some frames out in the sun to take care of any problems we might have with those frames related to hive moths. I'll probably go ahead and freeze those too, just to make sure they're safe to be used in another hive. And we've put 2 cooling / feeding boxes on the top of some other hives. I put pollen patties in 4 hives, and I'll add some more later today.